This episode of The Town is presented by HBO Max. HBO Max presents The Pit, nominated for 26 Emmy Awards, including Outstanding Drama Series. The staff of Pittsburgh Trauma Medical Center juggle personal crises, workplace politics, and high emotions in this Emmy-winning drama series. Don't miss the series USA Today called The Absolute Best Show on TV. The Pit is now streaming on HBO Max. It is Friday, August 28th. The Walt Disney Company is in a pretty intriguing place these days. It's considered the most stable of the legacy studios, thanks to its valuable brand and the massive theme park business. But the stock has essentially been flat for a decade. The TV business is crumbling, and the streaming business is barely profitable. And those parks are booming thanks in part to price hikes that are papering over stagnant attendance. All problems that the new CEO, Josh D'Amaro, is trying to fix. But these are nothing compared to some of the existential crises the company has faced, going all the way back to when Walt Disney and Roy O. Disney started the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studios in 1923 in Hollywood, California. We think of Disney as iconic and rock solid. It's worth $185 billion as of today. But it's kind of amazing how many times in its history it almost went bankrupt. Not just when Walt decided to go all in on feature animation when no one else was, or building an amusement park in some orange groves, or later when Disney was attacked by corporate raiders and Comcast. All of which I was reminded of in amazing detail by the Acquired podcast. It's one of my favorites. They devote hours and hours to one company, and the recent Disney episodes they dropped offer a great education on one of the great American companies, and a perfect jumping point for an episode of The Town. So I invited the show's hosts, Ben Gilbert and David Rosenthal, on the show to talk about it. Not just the history of Disney, but where it is today, and most importantly, how it's positioned for the future. From The Ringer and Puck, I'm Matt Belloni, and this is The Town. Okay, we are here with Ben Gilbert and David Rosenthal, the hosts and founders of the Acquired podcast, one of my favorites. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
You can imagine my delight when my Acquired podcast feed populated with a Disney episode. Right in my wheelhouse. I love talking about the Walt Disney Company. And I was amazed. I actually learned a lot from your episodes. I mean, obviously it's 8 hours long. So there's going to be a lot of time to discuss things that I maybe didn't know and that you will not find on Wikipedia. How much research did you guys do for these episodes?
I mean, we make 8 episodes a year. Disney was 2 of them. And we don't do anything else other than record the episodes. And so it's about 12 weeks for 2 episodes. And so, 60, 70 hours a week for 12 weeks.
Yeah. And we knew we were going to do this, so we were preparing in the background for a few months ahead of time too.
But you actually got access to Josh D'Amaro, Bob Iger, the Disney executives. They let you into the vault, the whole thing.
Yes, we found Mickey sort of trapped in the back screaming. It was a whole scene.
No, did you see Walt's severed head? That's the big rumor. Is Walt's head?
Man.
They swear it does not exist, that is a myth.
You are confirming right now that it does not exist in the vault.
It does not exist.
That is the line from the Walt Disney Company.
After having done this, and I think for our listeners who are familiar with Disney, I think the question I want to open with is, what surprised you most about Disney in researching this project?
For me, it was something we arrived at the end of part 2, which is, unlike other studios, Disney has a hidden form of leverage where people actually are fans of the studio more so than any individual property. And so that can be a real advantage where whenever they release something great, it deepens the brand love, but it also works against them, like any form of leverage, when they release a string of bad hits or bad movies, kind of early 80s of animation, or sort of the pre-Pixar years at Disney Animation, the late 90s, early 2000s. It cuts in both directions. And so, my favorite quote on this is, "What's your favorite Universal song?"
Nobody. Yeah.
And it's so illustrative of the point.
No, it's the brand equity. And it's always been the biggest asset and the biggest problem for them when they do something like launch Disney Plus, which is a great product, but because of the Disney brand, it's been very difficult for them to sell it as an everybody service. because people have an association with Disney. And, and I've had
Right.
conversations with them about animation even too. Netflix will point to the success of a movie like Swapped on Netflix, which is an animated movie they released. And I talked to somebody at Disney recently. They're like, if we release that, the knives would be out for us. It's just not good enough for us. Yet Netflix can put it out and people will watch it on Netflix.
And it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Exactly. Because there's no brand expectation there.
Yeah. I think for me, that was the other thing that was hugely surprising in the episode is how many times Disney animation almost disappeared in history, which is crazy. Like Disney animation is Disney. It is the most unique, special thing about Disney. And multiple times in history, it almost just disappeared.
So when do you think the most precarious moment for the company was?
Well, there's a lot of entertainment reporters who would say something like today.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. Trust me.
I don't think that, spoiler alert, probably the early 80s before the Bass brothers came in and basically bailed them out. I mean, it's pretty wild that the company was in such dire straits. There were all these corporate raiders coming in that the only way to save the company was to bring in their own corporate raider, issue a ton of new shares, dilute everyone, almost like a poison pill. But now they've got these brothers,
Texas guys, yeah,
who own 25% of the company that you now have to answer to. It's almost like your friendly, benevolent dictator shareholder. And then the only way now that you've shored up the shareholder base to save the company is to go and recruit, not internally, but a chairman and CEO from Paramount and a president from Warner's, and make that the new leadership of your company. And now everyone reports to them. And this all happened in like 2 months.
Right.
How over a barrel do you have to be that that's your best option?
And to completely change the direction of the company and have it be general interest content rather than family content, because that to me was the key point in the early 80s when you had the founder was gone. The brother was clearly not up to it. It was languishing under family control. And then it enters what is, I think, the Disney we know of as today, which is acquisitive and ambitious and growth-oriented rather than simply resting on the legacy of the creator.
Yep. And Michael Eisner deserves a ton of credit for that.
So much credit.
He took it from Walt Disney's Disney into the sort of empire Disney that we know today.
Can we settle this debate for now and forever? Who has been the better CEO of Disney, Michael Eisner or Bob Iger?
Okay, so how do you judge a CEO? What is the scoreboard that you judge them on? What is the scoreboard?
That is, you guys are the business experts here. You guys compare Disney to many other companies. So listen, Eisner, I think, can be credited with saving and modernizing the company and turning it into the Disney we know today. Iger, I think he rode a lot of the cable fortunes and was able to do a lot of what he did via the cash cow of ESPN and cable television. But he did position it, at least from where we stand, for what the future is going to be, which is streaming and parks and all of the IP strategy that they have employed. I don't know. I would probably say Eisner.
Yeah.
Just because of what he inherited versus what he turned over.
He probably wins on that subjective sort of soft analysis that you did, and on the raw numbers, just like how did they do with returns for shareholders. Michael 22.5x'd the stock price in his 21 years. And in Bob's 21 years, excluding his little step out, step back there, or if you just count it as continuous, the stock price was a 5x. Right. And, that's not the only way you should judge a CEO. And it's not even really the only financial way you should judge them, because you kind of have to wait another 10 years after they leave to see, hey, did the company get much more set up for success from their actions than the stock price at the time would have you believe. A great example of this is Steve Ballmer was actually a much better CEO at Microsoft than the current stock price when he left would have you believe, because he invented the enterprise, which became their entire model for the future. And he started the Azure project, which is now where the majority of the business is. And so
it's kind of like the old argument about presidents of like, if you like the first 2 years of the term of one president, you should really thank the previous administration for that.
Yeah.
So, there's some world where Josh that has this, exploding out of the gate first decade, and a lot of that credit actually should go to Iger. But what we do know for sure is Michael Eisner bought ESPN.
Yeah.
David and I tried to do some napkin math. We estimate that ESPN did about $75 billion of operating income for the company over its period from 1996 when they bought it as a small part of the Capital Cities ABC acquisition. That whole acquisition was $19 billion. And just that little part ESPN has in the fullness of time, which again, still prints of $3 billion a year or something of profits, has spit off $75 billion of operating income. So
and Eisner gets credit for that, even though the point of buying that company was ABC and they just happened to get 80% of ESPN with it.
Michael feels very strongly that the reason that they bought ABC and not another network was because they knew cable was going to be big and because ESPN was already showing signs that it was going to be the dominant cable channel.
Yeah. And not because the others turned him down.
But yes, the motivation was buy a broadcast.
Whatever. That's fine.
Sure.
You get credit. He can take a bow.
Yeah.
When I came into this business in the 2000s, I don't think I appreciated the role that ESPN and cable in general was playing in these companies because Disney didn't really talk about it.
They tried to hide it. They were obfuscating it every way they could.
You'd see it on the earnings and you would see it in how little the movies actually mattered. They would release Prince of Persia or Tomorrowland and take a $300 million write down on the Lone Ranger, and it wouldn't do anything to the stock because the movies didn't matter. I mean, they mattered obviously in the IP creation and the flywheel, but the only thing that mattered was when in 2015 they acknowledged that ESPN was losing subscribers, and then all hell broke loose. Because and I actually want to ask you guys here about maybe the biggest missteps of the modern era. And I think the biggest misstep on Disney's part is not planning for the streaming future before 2015.
Yeah, that really struck me.
Because for everything we know, they saw where everything was going. Jeff Bewkes at Time Warner was moving to break up the company and sell it off because he saw what was happening. Others did as well. Netflix was pretty big by 2015. But Disney did not move to create their streaming future until they saw that they had to acknowledge ESPN's weaknesses. Do you agree there?
I'll say I agree with some, but not all. I don't think I would have done anything different with ESPN. I think it was so smart of them to plan for, but not go all in on ESPN streaming until they did recently. Just because it was this cash cow that funded everything else and that there's no point in cannibalizing it till you need to.
But you think it was smart until 2018, 2019 to have their biggest movies on Netflix?
No, that's probably the thing I would have done differently. If had they launched Disney Plus earlier, well, two things. One, we heard the comment during research that Disney was selling the bullets to kill them to Netflix. Yeah. And they're like, why are we selling these bullets to our enemy?
That they keep shooting us with, yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't great. And then two, you're right. They're probably 5 years too late to launching their own streaming service. Because imagine the subscriber count that Disney Plus could have been at. Let's say where they were, COVID accelerated a lot. So let's not say 5 years, but let's say they could have been at the current numbers by 2023 instead of 2026. Then they could have started doing this bundling thing that they're obsessed with now and that everybody's getting obsessed with now earlier. And assuming the future of Netflix and the future of Disney are both being the distributor and then getting other people to distribute their content on their streaming bundle, they could have been in a better position. Whereas now it feels very reactive, and there's a danger that it is creating brand risk to put all these other things so close to Disney IP.
I think maybe put differently, Disney didn't realize, and I suspect very few people in Hollywood realized that streaming is a scale economies business and actually has very little to do with content. And if you just look at Netflix's profit margins versus any other player, it's like so clearly a scale economies business. Yeah. And that just all comes from Silicon Valley and tech.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that Hollywood had Hulu. Hulu was supposed to be that. It's just when you have multiple companies all owning a stake of a streaming service, and they all have their own ulterior motives with their very profitable cable television business, it was doomed from the start.
Yeah, wasn't Hulu called Clownco for a long time in the industry?
It was, yeah. Jason Kylar was the CEO, and he was sort of trying to pull them all in one direction, and they were going in different directions. The funny thing is when do you think CBS All Access launched? That was the CBS streaming service.
Ooh, this was the predecessor to Paramount Plus, right? It merged into Paramount Plus.
I'll tell you, it launched in 2014. So there was an example in the market of a network, a broadcast network that had a streaming service of their own, and Disney just didn't do it until later. It's tough, man. When you're making those profits and the margins are so good, and you're literally financing all of the acquisitions that the company has done, like it's tough to make that choice.
To paint the other side of it, though, if Disney's whole strategy is get as many people as you can to fall in love with the IP, go to parks, give us tons of profit dollars there, and buy consumer products and give us tons of profit dollars there. So I am very amenable to the argument, why would we constrain our content to this owned and operated streaming service when we could get way more exposure by putting it everywhere?
Yeah. Well, listen, I had a guest on last month who says Disney should get out of the streaming business now. And that the stock price languishing is a sign that it's just not an efficient business, and the margins are never going to be as good as television. So just become the world's biggest arms dealer and get the most money for your content everywhere. I don't agree with that.
No, absolutely not.
I think it diminishes the brand, and Disney's biggest asset is its brand, and its ability to compete in streaming is because in part of that brand. So I don't agree, but it's an interesting argument.
Also, that's pining for a future that is not there. I mean, that's an argument. Gosh, we should go back to the fat profits of the late 90s.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we should, but that's not an option. I mean, this is not the world that we live in today. Streaming is Disney's future. And unfortunately for the whole media industry, these are just not as good of businesses in the streaming era as they were when you could have some cable networks that were minting money, and you could be doing box office premieres when everybody wanted to go to the movies, and then you could re-release it 7 years later and still generate tens of millions of dollars, and then you could release it on home video and make many hundreds of millions of dollars in pure profit.
Oh man, the stories we heard about the DVD era in research were
it was wild, man. Those were the days. Those were like $2 million premieres, and just like crazy stunts they were doing all the time because you could not lose money on movies.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Katzenberg was on stage with a lion that attacked him. I mean, bring back those days, baby.
I know. The Spider-Man 2 premiere was on the Santa Monica Pier, and they shut it down and had a full-on carnival.
Amazing. All that said, though, that reminds me, the most surprising thing to me in all of our months of Disney research that we discovered was the Lion King musical.
Okay, so you guys have made this claim. I am on board with you, but I think there may be a little more nuance there. You claimed on the show that the Lion King is the most profitable entertainment entity of all time because it has made $11 billion as a franchise. Am I characterizing that correctly?
Yes, the highest revenue generating single static piece of content.
Okay, so you're not counting the MCU. You're not counting, the parks or something like that. You're saying...
No, one single production.
One single production.
Yes, the Lion King musical alone, not the movie, just the musical, has made $11 billion.
Right.
Which is 3 times as much as Avengers Endgame in its full theatrical and home video and streaming revenue.
The only question I have about that is I don't believe the Lion King is a massive consumer products property on the level of some of the princess stuff or Cars, for instance, or some of the other ways that Disney makes money.
Yes, correct. This does not account for merchandise.
Yeah, but not bad.
The other thing that is doesn't account for is several video games are larger, but they're not static. It's like Like Candy Crush has made more money than the Lion King musical, but it's always changing.
Right. I wonder how much Julie Taymor made. Because she, in Broadway, when you direct the Broadway play, you get a piece of the production. So I wonder how much she has made over the years.
Not insignificant sum, I am sure.
This episode is brought to you by Disney. What does it take to build a world people never want to leave? In Disney Worldbuilders, Academy Award and Emmy-nominated filmmaker Leslie Iwerks takes audiences inside the creative journeys of some of Disney's most influential storytellers, featuring exclusive interviews with James Cameron, Jon Favreau, Kevin Feige, and more. This documentary reveals the imagination, innovation, and storytelling that continue to inspire generations and shape entertainment. Now streaming on Disney+. Let's go back to the missteps. Are you in the camp that believes buying Fox was a misstep for Disney?
Yes. I'm even in the camp of pounding the table to spin many of the Fox assets back out.
Oh, wow. See, because I've been a defender of that deal. And so give me your argument why.
Well, okay. So I think the inarguable thing is it's the lowest ROI of any of the acquisitions. ESPN, Capital Cities, Pixar, Lucasfilm, Marvel, Fox.
Also the most expensive by far. And it got run up to an astronomical price.
Whatever they thought it was worth, they paid $19 billion more than that. That is the inarguable thing on the table.
Right. 71, I believe, was the total.
Not totally fair because you have to back out the piece of Sky that they sold and all the regional sports networks. So it ends up being like high 40s or something like that. I think it's a complete mismatch with the Disney brand. I think that there are a few things like reuniting the X-Men, like Avatar, that makes sense. I think it is the wrong strategy for Disney to be ever more tightly bundling Disney Plus with Hulu and family content and the whole Fox library. I think eventually where this leads, if you really are following we need scale economies, we need to build this giant streamer, you merge those brands. Like eventually this Hulu stuff kind of goes away. And the lowest friction thing is to not have a second app, to put everything in Disney Plus.
In most of the world, it's just Disney Plus, and it's fine.
And they make this argument that people are actually totally fine with that. I think this is something that shows up as an issue on the sort of 3-decade timeline, not on the 3-year timeline. I think it's a degradation of the thing that makes Disney different than other studios and other streamers.
See, I disagree there because ABC and ESPN and FX now, like they're just kind of owned and operated properties. Like they can, I think, coexist, even though the service is called Disney Plus. I think the audience is okay with that.
You think the Plus can do a lot of lifting there,
especially in this modern ecosystem where HBO Max does a lot with the Max, and Paramount Plus. Well, Paramount doesn't mean anything, so that's not a very good
I hate
example.
It, though. I want HBO to mean HBO. I mean, I think I'm 35 and I'm like 60.
I know.
In terms of my preciousness about content.
I see where you're coming from, but if you want to be one of the 4-5 companies that makes this transition into the streaming age as a destination and a survivor and something with the scale to compete, I don't know that you can do that with just the family content.
Yep. I buy that. My gripe with the Fox acquisition is the more standard one you hear. So I just don't think there was that much good stuff in there. I think they wildly overpaid for it. Avatar, great. Simpsons, great. Reuniting the MCU, great. What else you got,
I mean, it's not Disney, but FX is great.
Yeah, people say that though, but then all of a sudden they pull a Devil Wears Prada 2 out of their butts. Or they're working on trying to do a Home Alone reboot now. And like that stuff, I think will continue to manifest. And, FX maybe doesn't quite fit because it's so edgy. But there is enough in there, I think, that just gives them, especially when they were launching Disney Plus, it just gives them that ammo that it is all additive.
Yeah. And to your point, the more you can bundle together, the lower churn is going to be because people are going to view it as their one-stop shop and they're not going to think about it too hard.
I think without it, maybe Disney's ultimate destiny would be a tile on Netflix. And I don't think they're going to be a tile on Netflix.
I pine for the version of Disney that doesn't have the kitchen sink of content, but I think perhaps in my analytical mind, I'm with you, Matt, and I agree. You need to in this day and age.
All right. So, best acquisition in the history of the Walt Disney Company. What would you rank your top 3?
Oh, easy. Not even close. With all due respect to Bob Iger, it was Cap Cities and ESPN. There'll never be another acquisition like that.
Can I just make the argument for Pixar?
Sure. Oh, I would love to hear that argument.
Well, I mean, if you look at where Disney Animation was in the mid 2000s, and you look at the value that they got, not just out of the Toy Story studio and having all those titles, but of the management that came with Pixar, the ability to not just reinvent computer-generated animation, but also spread that across Disney Animation and completely revitalize the traditional studio. That, as you say on your show, is the heart and soul of the Disney business and its entire flywheel. And the impact of that Pixar deal is still being felt to this day.
Absolutely. We got to go to Pixar and just see the campus and talk to folks and meet everybody. It is such a special place. Like, it really is.
Although they're annoyed these days. They're annoyed by the layoffs. They're annoyed by the micromanaging from Burbank.
Sure, yeah, but it's still, there's no place else like Pixar in the world. It's more than just, Disney propagandizing itself in Pixar. It really is a special place.
Wait till Josh D'Amaro tells them to make their $200 million movies for $100 million. Which is coming.
That's going to be tough.
We know that's coming.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Pixar is they have continued to make films more efficiently, but the complexity of films has risen at exactly the same rate. Like, I think their person hours on films has dramatically dropped, but wage inflation basically perfectly counteracts that. And the films continue to come out for the same dollars and less person hours, so much more complex each time. But you can't outrun inflation.
It's tough. And they make them in California for, lack of a better word, like that, not outsourcing can add to the cost.
Yeah. They're the last animation studio that doesn't outsource.
Yeah. I hope they figure it out.
Pixar is the only other one you can argue, and it's the exact point you made. To the extent that it's true that everything good at Disney is downstream of creating beloved IP in Disney Animation, then yes, it was like binary for the company long term to have Disney Animation work, and Pixar characters sort of brought into that fold.
But ESPN funded buying Pixar.
Yeah, exactly.
and ESPN funded everything. Like,
everything.
ESPN profits made it so that Disney could do this D2C transition better than anybody else. There's been carnage everywhere, but ESPN was this sort of stabilizing force that enabled Disney to stay independent, make decisions judiciously, and not end up in this, like, let's combine things that don't make sense era.
Right. So I'm going to agree with you. ESPN and Cap Cities ABC, that was the
$75 billion in operating profit. Come on.
Yes, I am going to agree with you. I just wanted to make the Pixar argument, and
yes. I'm glad you did.
Let's talk about the Disney of today and where they sit. How precarious is the moment right now? Are you worried about Disney?
Let's see. Let's answer this division by division. I think the giant amount of CapEx that they are funneling into experiences, into parks and cruises.
Yep. $60 billion.
Yeah. Safest place you can park money in the world. It's just this proven thing that people will pay ever more for with the rising global inequality and the rising amount of global wealth. There are huge amounts of dollars that you can continue to extract for decades to go to Disney parks and cruises. So I think that's a durable, smart, safe investment. I think the thing that concerns me about the core is, what is the next Frozen? Because out of Disney Animation and Pixar, it's now been 9 years since they had a box office smash of something that was not a sequel or not a reusing existing IP. And it's fine to not have that for 2 or 6 or maybe 8 years. I think once you start going over a decade, then you start kind of wondering, okay, we need something to feed the flywheel here for decades to come. So that that would probably be, if I'm in Josh's shoes, my biggest thing is...
Or is that over? Hoppers was pretty damn good, yet it got to about 400.
It was good.
That would have done 6, 7 in the pre-COVID era. If it was good, good, and maybe if they released it in June, but like maybe that era of creating new franchises in theaters for animation is over.
That, I think, is terrifying if you're the Walt Disney Company. That you don't get all these great downstream effects without creating that shared cultural moment. And maybe it doesn't need to exist at the box office, but I think it's really hard to make it exist on streaming in a way that, we need those 1977 Star Wars moments.
Yeah. I think a big test will be when they get around to doing an Encanto sequel, because that movie shares the DNA of the movies that do become Disney franchises.
Such a good movie.
Because it's huge on home video on Disney Plus. It's got very popular music. It had a hit song on it. And it's something that there will ultimately be nostalgia for Encanto. So how Disney handles that and whether they can produce a sequel that continues that franchise, I think maybe they have an opportunity there.
Will there be nostalgia for K-pop Demon Hunters?
Yeah, I think so. That's the one Netflix movie, because of the music. It took it out of the realm of something you watched on TV and brought it into your regular life. And you could not go to an elementary school without hearing that music. It took over the culture for a few months. And that's when they put it back in theater. They put it in theaters to capture that momentum. So I do think there will be nostalgia. And when the sequel comes out, it will become a cultural moment. I believe Netflix will put it in theaters. Now, I've convinced myself that Netflix will put the Demon Hunter sequel in theaters because of that.
So that is the counter argument, that this can still exist even in the streaming era. And K-pop Demon Hunter sort of proves that you can create these emotional sort of shared cultural frenzies that are around something that aren't UGC sort of creator content.
That may be the exception that proves the rule. But for Disney, I do think that doing well enough in theaters with some of these and then having them explode at home, that could be the answer.
And then the one more division, though, for the state of Disney, I think ESPN is actually a bit of a sleeper now within Disney.
You think it's bottomed?
I think it's, bottomed and coming back up. And I think it's not in as bad a place as you might necessarily think on the surface.
Why is that? It's not like sports rights are going to get any less expensive.
Well, I think the leagues are incentivized to keep it around as a viable bidder because they're as terrified of the tech companies when it comes down to it as the media companies are. So I think when you saw the NFL network that they did with the NFL, that was a big moment for ESPN still maintaining relevance and for the NFL to take a 10% stake in the network.
Yeah, ESPN essentially is taking over NFL Network.
Yep. And then I think you look at the standalone over-the-top streaming services that all the leagues have, whether it's MLB TV or NHL has their, or NFL has their own, NBA has NBA TV, et cetera, et cetera. ESPN and Disney operate hockeys, the NHLs themselves. They obviously used to operate baseballs because BAMTech came from baseball. I think there might be a future where they get deeper partnerships for streaming with actual leagues themselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
All right, and here's the other argument why ESPN has bottomed. Today, it does somewhere on the order of $3-ish billion in operating income. In their absolute heyday, 2012, 13, 14, they were doing, call it 4.7, 4.8 billion. So it had to come down. Like the market clearing price for what people would pay for ESPN is not as high as the incredible rents they were extracting from 100 million people paying for cable. But between the direct over-the-top service and all the bundling they're doing, it is still some very high number that people are willing to pay for ESPN. And it was just about finding what that sort of new bottom was.
Listen, guys, your show was great. I love the Acquired Pod. It's a very accessible business podcast for people who are hardcore addicts like me and even casual observers of these companies. It's a really great show. So congratulations. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Matt.
Appreciate it.
We are back with the call sheet. Craig, a really interesting weekend at the box office for late August. This is usually dumping ground time, and I guess it kind of is. But we're not going to talk about the Ridley Scott movie, Dog Stars. Sad for Ridley Scott. He's getting dumped in late August.
Why aren't we talking
because
about
I want to talk about the other movie, but it's at $14 million. I mean, do you care about this movie? $70 million budget. It's a Disney movie through 20th. Like, I think it's not going to get there. I think I'd take the under on 14.
It's just remarkable. It's a Ridley Scott movie with Jacob Elordi, Josh Brolin, and Margaret Qualley. Wikipedia says the budget is 110. Is that not correct?
That may be the gross budget. I don't know what it netted out at, but honestly, let's talk about Coyote versus Acme. That is the interesting movie here. This is the movie that all of Hollywood is rooting for, right? This is the movie that David Zaslav, when he took over Warner Brothers, he killed it for a tax credit. It's a victim of the corporate overlords, which is funny enough. The theme of the movie, the Acme Corporation, is basically Warner Brothers Discovery. And this movie was written off and then taken by Ketchup Entertainment, which is an independent production or independent distributor. They paid $50 million to get this movie, and they think they can make a profit on it. And the tracking, not super great. It's at like 15. I've seen higher. This is going to be hard because the internet wants this movie to succeed so much that it might be like tainting the tracking numbers. So
yeah, I think like the media community is so loud in support of this movie that you see so much of that support online that it's hard to tell what normal people actually think about it. Like the Rotten Tomato scores are outstanding, but that doesn't necessarily accurately portray whether it's good. We don't know.
I know. It's so funny because the David Zaslav team, when they came in there, they were quietly whispering that these movies that they killed, like Batgirl and the Scooby-Doo movie and Coyote versus Acme, they were actually pretty bad. And we were embarrassed by them.
Yeah.
And then here it comes out and it has a 10 times better score than most of the Warner Brothers movies this year.
What do you think David Zaslav wants this movie to open to?
0.
What will make him happy?
$0.
What I'm saying, like, what number will piss him off? Like, how high does it have to get where he thinks he made a mistake?
20. If it gets to 20, then it'll piss him off because that's where, you know, with a decent overseas number and a good multiple, it could approach like making its money back if they had agreed to make it, to release it. And, you know, the marketing for Warner Brothers probably would have been bigger and better than the marketing from Ketchup Entertainment. So it's not apples to apples, but if this movie gets to 20, great. I'm going to take the over on 15. I think the groundswell online is not totally real, but it will have some impact, and I think it'll get above the tracking.
This is probably the definition of an opening weekend swell that won't have a ton of legs. Also, 15, I feel like, is on the lower end of the prediction. I feel like the tracking is usually in the 15 to 22 range. So 15 does feel low if we're picking that as the number, as the line.
Well, but I'm going by NRG with some influence from some of the others. I have seen as high as 20.
The problem is like this IP is so, we don't know how much people really care about that anymore right now. Like, personally, I do not feel compelled to go see this.
My 10-year-old knows about Looney Tunes, and he doesn't really...
He knows Wile E. Coyote?
He does. He knows them from Space Jam.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, he knows them from Space Jam. And like, I caught him watching on some like linear channel, like the Toon Network or something. Not Cartoon Network. There's some other Toon channel on linear, and he was watching old Looney Tunes stuff. So, I don't know. That may be anecdotal, but I agree with you. It's a tougher sell. This is also not... It's like a legal drama. It's not a drama, it's a comedy, but it's like, it's got procedural legal elements that are not necessarily conducive to kids viewing. But whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the over. I want this movie to succeed just so David Zaslav has to send some email saying congratulations.
And then Batgirl is next.
No, they will never talk about this movie again. Warner Brothers, even if it's a big hit, they will never mention it again. So we'll see. I don't know where it'll stream. I don't know if it'll go to HBO Max, actually. I got to check that out. All right, that's the show for today. I want to thank my guests, Ben Gilbert and David Rosenthal, producer Craig Horlbeck, our editors Jessie, Lopez, and Stefano Sanchez. And I want to thank you. We will see you next week.